All right, today is the day. We are finally doing the PvP Star Citizen single seat fighter tier list. That's right, and we're starting off with the biggest brain move you can possibly ask for, F class, which stands for fail, because these ships, oh boy, let's get started. Alright, so if you catch yourself out in the persistent universe flying either a constellation, a Pisces, or an Argo raft, there's a should put a prospector on here, but I mean, you are basically food for pretty much everything else in the game. I put the constellation in here because we're doing this based off of a single person. So a constellation, when she's fully crewed, is most likely going to be able to defend itself a lot better. But when it's just one person, constellation it's in a bad spot. Too slow to really catch anything. Guns with the turn rate so low, I mean, if you're trying to do any kind of dogfighting other than disengage and run away, it's just simply not going to happen. So F class is Pisces constellation and the new Argo raft, with also the prospector in there, but it's a mining ship, so I kind of forgot about it. All right, moving on to E class. So E class gets a little more interesting. We have the Prowler. Her fall from grace when she originally came out, it was something around A or S tier. When the Prowler originally came out, the ship was absolutely monstrously overpowered. Spotting a trend here. Then we have the Reliant Tana, the whole series, including the other Tanas, the other Reliants. Freelancer again, the Saber Raven, the Blade, the Terrapin, the Mustang Omega and Beta, as well as the 350R. Now, the reason why these ships are in E class is because Prowler, with its crazy low turn rate and not really great shields, getting kills with a Prowler is very, very difficult, and you're basically a giant floating target. Any kind of fighter, any kind of ships that you'll see in the higher classes would have an easy time taking on the Prowler, even with a skilled pilot. And again, these are PvP tier lists, guys. So regardless of where the position of the ship is and what CIG's intended role for that ship is, I'm just giving you my opinion on where ships stand PvP wise right now in 315, right? And I can tell you with confidence that the Prowler is a solid E tier. Reliant, too slow, too big, made of absolute paper, E class. Freelancer, too slow, too big, basically can't hit a target. Again, Raven, too small. Well, not too small, but like just made of paper again, with no real great offensive weaponry. You can take a few hits in this thing, you're basically gone, and there's not enough acceleration to be, for something that light. Even with the EMP, that doesn't really do much. The Blade, because its cannons make it basically impossible to land shots, just like the Glaive. And just, again, made of paper with no real DPS. You have to turn off the size 3 cannons to get any kind of meaningful DPS coming out. The Terrapin, because we have 2 size 2 guns, a abysmally bad turn rate. I mean, the only thing going for the Terrapin is it's a tough turtle, but any skilled pilot will be able to kill a Terrapin. The fact that I've been able to kill people with Terrapins on the channel doesn't speak to how incredible the ship is. It just speaks to how fundamental and understanding your flight combat is, and that you can take ships from E class and beat stuff in S class. Mustang Omega, because again, absolutely made of paper. Like anything hits this thing, gone. So don't fly this thing and expect to survive with only 2 size 1 guns as well. And again, same problem with the 350R, made of paper. And again, these are racing ships, so that kind of makes sense. So I guess it makes sense that they're sitting in E class, but any kind of legitimate dogfighting in PvP. If you catch yourself on one of these two ships, say your prayers. D class, let's take a look. So in we are headed to D tier, starting off with the Cutlass Black. And this is true for all Cutlasses, the red, the black, the blue. The reason why the Cutlass is in D tier is because even though she has a decent weapon loadout, when piloted by one person, the abysmally low turn rate, the massive cross section, only having one size 2 shield, it really knocks the Cutlass down in effectiveness. I'm not sure if CIG wants the Cutlass to be a death box, but it is a death box. The glaive, many of you have been watching stream and understand my position on the glaive. Even though we have decent maneuvering on the glaive, her G-forces on turns and just the overall stickiness, I guess, of the ship itself in terms of its ability to get around corners, which is quite good. The glaive suffers from a pathetic turn rate, and on top of that, you have abysmally slow cannons, which make it one of the most difficult ships to get any kind of damage onto a target, and any skilled pilot's going to be able to walk circles around you and just make you eat shit. So D tier. The 100i, for just being, again, made of basically Lego blocks and dominoes, because it's absolutely pathetic in terms of it cannot take a hit to save its life with only one size 1 shield. Even though it's maneuverable and it feels nice, and I'm actually a fan of the 100i, it's D tier. Pisces Expedition, which is the upgraded Pisces, we went from F tier Pisces C8X to the D tier Pisces, because the Pisces with 4 size 1 guns at least is somewhat viable and can get kills. So it's a very, very weak D tier, but she does make it. Then we have the Talon Shrike, not the Talon, like the Asperia Talon Shrike, because 2 size 2 guns, again, relatively large cross section, not the greatest shielding, power issues just like the other Talon models, so slow recharges and just general issues with the ship. She's a solid D tier when it comes to PvP, because right now, if you have missiles, I mean, that's cute. I have decoys, which means your missiles mean nothing. Followed by the Drake Herald. Again, it's basically a rocket ship made from tin cans, soda bottles, and a Pringles can. And someone strapped a Rogers router and maybe a dish from Tesla on the side and said, that's a ship, let's sell it. So I don't know what the fuck CIG wants with this thing, but in terms of dogfighting, I mean, this thing has one job: get the fuck out. Then we have the Inferno, the Ares, and again, right, this makes sense that the Ares is sitting around D tier, because the Ares for PvP, the amount of target time you need with these guns is, like, first of all, getting target time at all with this thing is a chore, and then on top of that, you have a spool up timer, which is insanely long, and a weapon that basically is shooting snowballs. I mean, I can literally outrun the projectiles fired at me, because they only go 700 meters per second. So, D tier. The Mantis, which makes sense, because the Mantis is not a true dogfighter in the sense that it's not really designed to be a dogfighter. It's designed, unlike the rest of these ships in D tier, big brain move, the Mantis actually is useful because it stops people from warping around. It has a 20-kilometer interdiction bubble that stops people, and that alone is a fantastic weapon system in general. Being very fast on its feet and very nimble with 2 size 3 guns, it's not incompetent, but it truly is made of hopes, dreams, pledge packages, and cardboard, because this thing absolutely fucking melts instantly. And it kind of makes sense, because, I mean, if that thing was tough as balls, oh boy, there'd be a lot of upset people out there that wouldn't be able to get away from that thing. And then to wrap it up on D tier, we have the Eclipse. Again, not a true dogfighter. It's a stealth bomber, but it does have 2 size 2 guns and a relatively decently controllable flight profile to get you kills if you know the fundamentals. But she's a very solid D tier. So let's take a look at C. So C gets a little interesting. There's some ships in C tier that we'll talk about here that I feel probably shouldn't be there, but unfortunately they are. Starting off with the 325A. Again, Origins, like, premier dogfighter, I guess you could say. A reason why she's in C tier is because even though it has a decent weapon loadout, the jerk profile, which means the sluggishness of its turn rate, requires the ship to be very careful in how you perform maneuvers, because any kind of nose issues is going to fall with weapons off target, right? So it's hard to get on target with the Origin and stick on target. And being physically very large and being, again, like not having very many hit points. So being large with low hit points is just a recipe for disaster. And even though she's fast, the Origin ships get absolutely decimated by everything else. Nomad, because surprisingly enough, the Nomad, even though it's a basically pickup truck, it's got a good turn rate. It's I expected the Nomad to be sitting around D and E tier, but to be honest, the Nomad is a very strong C tier, almost B tier in its handling, maneuverability, weapons in general, with its 3 size 1 shields, its 3 size 3 fixed weapons, and a relatively decent maneuvering profile. The Nomad is a ship that people should not sleep on. However, the Buccaneer, oh boy, the Buccaneer. The Buccaneer is Drake's premier dogfighter, essentially, and it flies like shit. I mean, it flies lazy. It has almost no maneuvering thruster accelerations. It has relatively decent forward acceleration, but again, its weapons aren't anything special. It suffers some power issues. It has all kinds of bugs with thrusters, so if you take any kind of hits on the back, your ship basically goes into an uncontrolled spin, and essentially it makes you only have half the hit points, because effectively once you start spinning out of control, you've lost the fight. So, should the Nomad be as competitive as the Buccaneer, considering one's a pickup truck, not designed for combat, and the Buccaneer is literally designed specifically for combat? I don't know. That's up to CIG, but the Buccaneer is a solid C tier, almost D tier. I'm lucky. You guys are lucky at Drake, because I should have put her in D tier, but she's in C. Then we have the Archimedes and the Merlin. Now, this was a bit of a tricky one, because some people consider the Merlin and the Archimedes better. However, I base this off of expert/ace pilots that I constantly go up against. And I know for a fact that if I'm up against people and I'm in a Merlin or an Archimedes, I mean, if I'm up against ace pilots, I'm going to pay the price. Shooting rookies down with Merlins isn't a good example of how good the fighter is, but against really top tier pilots, the Archimedes and the Merlin don't fare too well. So I feel like, to be honest, them being C tier is actually not a bad position, since they are snub fighters. They're very small. Possibly CIG will put them into B tier later on, but with the Merlin's only size 1 guns, and the Archimedes 4 size 1s, I'd take the Archimedes over the Merlin, but they're essentially in the same class. Then we have the Cartual, which I barely put this thing in C tier, because I should have put it in D. I mean, it is so bloody easy to hit. It's absolutely massive. Its maneuvering is strong, but it's, again, made of paper, and it's easy to hit, especially when you start jacking the speeds up with the current flight model. So Cartual pilots out there, it's a nice ship. Again, hunting rookies down and being able to walk circles around rookies is one thing, but against expert pilots, they know how to distance control, and the Cartual loses basically its most important advantage, and that's its ability to get out of somebody's arc of fire. So either they give it more acceleration or they do some changes to the flight model, but right now the Cartual is a very weak C tier. Then we have the Ares Ion, which is the sister to the Ares Inferno, and the reason why she's in C tier is because that alpha shotgun can quite literally one-shot some light fighters. So if you have very skilled aim, if you are very on point, if you are very patient, and you can make a shot, all you need is one shot, and you will kill your target. You will kill a 325A if you shoot it in the face. You will kill an arrow if you shoot it in the face, and you will significantly damage a Gladius if you shoot it in the face. So C tier, Ares Ion for dogfighting. Now, wrapping the C tier up is the Hawk. Now, the Hawk is a tricky one. The Hawk, I was kind of jumping between B tier and C tier, but Again, I base this off of if I'm fighting ace or expert pilots, and I can say confidently that the Hawk is not performing where it needs to be. Again, very low hit points, even though it has strong guns. The problem is applying that damage to the target. The Hawk has a poor jerk profile, which means the responsiveness of the ship in its yaw is absolutely pathetic. It's got almost constellation level shittiness in its yaw, and it's a fighter. So basically you have absolutely no choice but to fight exclusively in pitch. And I'm sorry, but without a relatively responsive yaw, the Hawk is too easy to shake off its damage, which means it doesn't apply its damage where it should. And even though it has an EMP, that EMP is not going to turn your ship off unless you've really got the guy's shields down. You're at very point blank range. I mean, overall, the effectiveness of the Hawk is a solid C tier. I wish it was B tier, but we need a more responsive yaw, and we need a little bit more hit points for us to consider the Hawk a B tier. But maybe in the future, the Hawk will get some more love. So let's take a look at B tier. Starting off, surprisingly, I put the Aegis Avenger in B tier, and this goes for pretty much the whole Aegis Avenger line. After really spending time with the Aegis Avenger, I can confidently say that even though I have problems with the Aegis Avenger in terms of it's not having enough hit points, it's having relatively weak maneuvering thrusters, she does have decent grip on her belly. Her gun loadout is not terrible, and she does have 2 size 1 shields. And that alone makes the Aegis Avenger not terrible. I thought I was going to put her in C tier, but after a lot of flight time, I can say that she's a very weak B tier, but she's in B tier. In the hands of a skilled pilot, you are going to do quite well with the Aegis Avenger. Then we get to the Mustang Alpha, which again is a very strong B tier, almost A tier dogfighter with great maneuvering, sharp, responsive turn, 2 size 1 shields, and 4 guns. The Alpha is a dogfighter that people should be watching because for a rookie ship, it is the absolute best out of all the ships, specifically when it comes to dogfighting, which is what it was designed to do. So good job on CIG with the Mustang. Then we have the Hornets, the Supers, the Trackers, the Ghost Hornets, all the Hornets. B tier. Again, just like the Saber, these have the same, I put them both in the same category because they just don't have the maneuvering profile they need to be able to avoid any kind of fire, which means they're going to take a lot of hits, and they don't have the hit points to tank the hits because they're not a heavy fighter. So CIG is kind of in this weird spot where they're just not fast enough to avoid fire, but they're too small to take all the hits that a heavy fighter does. So they kind of got shoved in between, and they're just not good at anything. They're not good at taking hits. They're not good at avoiding hits. They're not particularly good at DPS either. So we need to see some love for the Hornet and the Saber. You either need to give them more weapon power, more recharge, give them a little more hit points, or give them slightly more accelerations, which I think they should do. I think the medium fighters need to be brought up about 10 to 15% across the board on all metrics for them to be truly competitive against the light fighters. The Aurora, surprisingly enough, the Aurora is in the same class as the Mustang, even though I think the Aurora is slightly at a disadvantage against the Mustang. It's small profile, it's 4 guns, and relatively maneuverable, MAV thrusters. The Aurora is a solid B tier. Don't sleep on the Aurora because it will fuck your face if you're not careful. So Aurora gets a solid B tier. Good job, RSI. Then the Gladiator, the Anvil Gladiator. Again, another ship that people sleep on. It has a ridiculous amount of hit points, like something like 50,000 hit points or something silly. And 2 size 3 guns. And those 2 size 3 guns do not have a stop button. I mean, they have like 80 to 90 rounds as the pilot. So you can just shoot for days. Which is nutty, is absolutely nutty. And people don't realize how important that is. I mean, I have enough laser magazine charge to kill a guy outright without recharging at all, which means I can keep my power in my shields the entire fight and just get on target and boom, 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 boom. Then we have the Anvil Hurricane. Again, the Hurricane, if flown by 2 people, 2 pilots, it would be S tier, no problem. But with 1 pilot, we're sitting around B tier. With 1 size 2 shield, okay maneuverability. To be honest, for being a quote-unquote glass cannon, it really doesn't maneuver that well. So I'd like to see a maneuvering buff applied to the Hurricane and a hit points nerf, which would allow the Hurricane to fulfill its role, which is basically a very fast, very coordinated glass cannon type fighter. Then we have the Banner Defender. Surprisingly enough, the Banner Defender is actually not that terrible. I personally don't like it because of the issues of visibility and just the overall shape design and weapon placement, that kind of stuff. But if you can trade with your opponent like how the Gladiator is, if you can just aim down your opponent and just give up maneuvering, like trying to outmaneuver them, just try to go straight for the shots, the Banner Defender does quite well. Because it's 1 size 2 shield does give it that extra bit of defense it needs to take and tank the shots as it dishes them out, right? So, and then wrapping up the B tier, we have the Asperia Talon, just the Talon. The Talon, unfortunately, doesn't make it into A tier, which I feel like it should be, but with its 2 size 4 guns and the current weapon balance, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. You don't have the DPS. You don't have the recharge. You know, it's toothless is really what it comes down to. So Talon, unfortunately, B tier for PvP. All right, let's wrap it up with A tier and S tier. So as to nobody's surprise, we see the M50 from Origin, the Arrow, the Aegis Vanguard series, excluding the Sentinel. Spoiler alert. The Misk Razor and the 85X. So right now we have 2 Origin fighters, a Misk and the Arrow from Anvil. The M50 is small, which is a big deal when it comes to PvP because it makes it exponentially more difficult to apply damage to a small target. 2 size 2 guns, which have like 60 rounds, like they just shoot for days. Like capacity is a big deal. The M50 with 2 size 1 shields, so it has the same shields as a Gladius. The M50 is a solid A tier, almost S tier. You know, if in the hands of a skilled pilot, the M50 is disgusting. Like, it's so small, so hard to hit, and it can just sit there and shoot you full of holes the entire time because it's so smooth, precise, and powerful. It's a very solid A tier. Then we get to my favorite ship in the game, the Anvil Arrow, because it's, again, super precise, super controllable, very maneuverable, decent weapons, but the big killing factor between the Arrow and the Gladius is the Arrow with its 1 size 1 shield. I don't know what CIG was thinking, but the Arrow with this 1 size 1 shield and the current weapon balance leaves the Arrow on A tier. Then we get the Vanguard series. Again, all the Vanguards except the Sentinel. Again, it doesn't really matter that you can maneuver because all you got to do is point your nose in the direction of the enemy and let your 2 size 2 shields do the talking, and then just absolutely hose everything down that gets in front of you. So Vanguard, very solid A tier. Misk Razor, same thing as the M50. Very small platform, 2 size 2 guns, very maneuverable, 2 size 1 shields. Like, you know, Razor and M50 are racing ships, but I mean, they're ridiculous. So powerful, so accurate, very good for PvP. And then wrapping it up is the 85X, which again falls into the same category as the M50 and the Razor. Very small, very powerful, and with decent shielding. So there you have it. That's A tier. I mean, all those ships in A tier are absolute monsters. So let's wrap it up. We're almost at half an hour, boys. Let's wrap it up with S tier. As to nobody's surprise, we have the Aegis Gladius and the Aegis Vanguard Sentinel. So I talk about this all the time on the stream. The 2 size 1 shields, extremely tight, controllable maneuvering thrusters, 3 size 3 guns, super responsive pitch and yaw control. The Gladius is truly the dogfighter that it was designed to be. I mean, it has a 200-year-old reputation for being the dogfighter of choice for the military. And of course, it's Squadron 42's main ship, so it makes sense that the Gladius is in S tier. However, it was the Vanguard Sentinel that made its debut here for us in S tier. Again, right? With the flight model currently the way it is, flying at ludicrous speed, which means anything above 500, rewards people who have larger shields and bigger guns. And the Vanguard Sentinel with its EMP covers basically its only weakness. So getting close to a Vanguard at point blank range and orbiting around it is really where the Vanguard has trouble. But in this case, the Vanguard Sentinel with its EMP, which is very strong, by the way, all the Vanguard Sentinel has to do is hit you a few times, maybe 3 or 4 times, which, so maybe about half a second of true trigger time to knock the shields down on, let's say, an attacking Arrow or Gladius. And then goes the EMP, and your ship is toast. So I don't have a lot of good things to say about the gameplay when it comes to the Sentinel. I think the EMP and just the nature of the ship in general is very toxic for PvP. It's very negative. It's really not an enjoyable thing to fight, nor is it an enjoyable thing to fly, and nor is it a skill-based mechanic. So it checks all 3 boxes for this is shit here, here, and here. I think CIG should seriously consider doing some reworking when it comes to the Vanguard Sentinel, because it is a disgusting ship that has attracted some disgusting players to fly it as their main ship. So that's my opinion of the Vanguard Sentinel. Although I feel the Gladius deserves its spot at S tier when it comes to dogfighting, because we are ranking dogfighting ships' capabilities in PvP only, not PvE. PvP, player versus player only, right? But that's it, folks. That's my tier list for 315. We didn't put the 600i in here because the 600i is not a fucking dogfighting ship. Whoever told you that the 600i was a competent dogfighting ship is either lying to you or they simply do not understand PvP. I don't know who said it, but I heard a rumor that the 600i was touted as being some great invention for PvP, and I can tell you right now that it's just simply not true. I mean, anybody on the E, or maybe not the F, but even the E, the E or the D tier ships could easily kill a 600i, let alone something in the S or A tier. It would just be an absolute knockdown. It's just simply not fair. But there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's video. It was very, very long. We did it, guys. We made almost a half an hour. Thank you so much, guys, for all the love and support. But this is the de facto PvP tier list for 315 as told by Avenger One. And I hope to see all you guys out for stream. I hope to see all you guys out for the YouTube channel videos. And please leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. And I will see you next time.